guys, welcome to Real Life of a Teacher. I'm Claire, and today I want to share with you some ideas about how to do your first novel of the school year. So I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade language arts and social studies. So today I'm focusing on the language arts part, obviously. So my school's a little unique in that I teach multi-age. So I have 6th and 7th graders together, and I like to start the year off with my 6th, 7th, and 8th graders all together in one novel. And I like to do this for a couple of reasons. The first thing is I think it really helps to build that sense of community. And the other thing is I haven't finished all of my assessments, so I don't know what the reading level is of all of my students. So if I pick something that's at a lower level and accessible to all of my students, that's a really positive way to start the year. So there are two things that I think about that are requirements when I'm picking my first novel of the year. The first thing is that it's a lower level, but it's a really high engagement book. And I do this because, as I said before, I don't have all of the data yet to put my students into their specific reading groups. And this way everybody gets included and everybody gets to work together. I also want it to be that really high engagement and kind of an easy read for some of my students because I want us to start off the year where everybody feels successful, everybody has a good time with reading, and reminding them that reading is really very fun. And I use this lower level to review or teach the basic story elements, so like plot and character and setting. And if there's an easier text, it allows them to think more deeply about those elements to get started with. Later in the year, we get to harder books, things that are more challenging reads, but to review those basic elements, it's nice to have something that's a little bit easier. The second requirement when I'm picking a book is that it teaches a lesson. And I like to start the year by talking about bullying and acceptance and empathy and respect and sending that message that everybody can succeed. So let me give you some examples of the kinds of books that I would choose. I'm really lucky in that I have a really big budget for books and I get to order new books every year for my class, and it's amazing. So I've done this with 2 different books and I'm about to do it with a 3rd one. So the first book that I did was Wonder. Right here. This is a fantastic book. It's often, and that's sort of true for all of these, that it's usually done with 5th graders, which is really very appropriate. I do it as that beginning of year sort of easy book to get into things. So this is a book about a boy who has like facial deformations, and he has never been to school before because he's been in the hospital so much to deal with the abnormalities on his body. And he's going into 5th grade for the first time in a public school. Actually, it's not a public school, into a private school, but regardless, he has to sort of deal with being bullied because he looks different, never having been to a school before, so he hasn't really had a lot of experience interacting with other kids. And there's the bullying, and then he makes friends, and there's the, positive role models in the book, and it's a success story. At the end of the book, he is surrounded by people who care about him, and he is feeling successful. So that's a really good one. The book that I used last year was Out of My Mind, and I don't have a paper copy of that because we ended up reading it on the Kindles that we have at school, but that is another phenomenal book. It doesn't feel quite as uplifting at the end, though. So this story is about a girl who has cerebral palsy, and she's been in special ed her whole life because she has such a hard time communicating because people think she can't speak, which lead them to think that she's just not smart, which is totally not true. In fact, she's super, super smart. And she thinks she's being accepted by her peers throughout the book, and you get this, great feeling, and then you realize that she's not so much. And she, at the end of the book, ends up bonding more with her family and some of her older friends, like the adults in her life. So it's not the same sort of uplifting ending as Wonder is, but it's also a little bit more real, I think, than Wonder is. So it's a wonderful book. Similar to Wonder in that it's lower level and it's got somebody with disabilities who overcomes. It's a really nice story. So the book I'm using this year is called Fish in a Tree. It's right here. And I just finished reading this one like 2 weeks ago. It was actually recommended to me by one of my 8th graders from last year who really liked this book. And this one's different in that the main character doesn't have a physical disability but has a learning disability instead. And the story is about a girl who is dyslexic and doesn't know that she's dyslexic and thinks that, she has the words moving on the page and she pretty much can't read and is keeping that a secret from everybody. So it's her story of finding a teacher and finding friends because she feels like a failure. She feels like she just does everything wrong. And then it turns out that she has a learning disability and that's something that she can overcome. And she works at that with one of her new teachers. So I like this one a lot because it directly relates to reading, which is the point of what we're doing, right? We're going to be learning about reading, so it's a story about a girl who struggles to learn with reading, which is obviously relatable to a lot of my students. So during this reading unit, I do a couple of different things. The first thing that I do is I'm doing my reading assessments. So we take the NEWA as a school. I give DRAs to some of my students who need a little bit more specific information. And that allows me to put them into really specific reading groups for our next. The big focus of our unit is to practice and review the story elements. These are things that all of my students have learned before, but they probably haven't thought about it in a little bit, so we go through plot and character and theme and setting and all of that kind of stuff. During this unit, we also start to set up our readers' notebooks. So we put in our table of contents and we do some foldables in there. We learn different ways of taking notes. We might do like a dialectic journal where we're taking quotes and responding to those quotes. Sometimes I use the signposts, which is Kylene Beers and Bob Probst, which is a phenomenal strategy. So I'll review that with some of my students who have had it last year. I do all of those sort of like little practice things to get them back into the flow of the things they already know how to do. Some of the interactive notebooks that I really like, there's a couple from Lovin Lit. I'll link that down below, that I think are really good to practice those skills and remind ourselves what the different elements of a story are. I don't use the full unit, but I pick and choose little pieces from it, and I think that it's really good. All right, and that's all that I have for you guys today. So I hope that that helped give you some inspiration for how to start your reading this year. I think that it's really fun to start with a novel, and I think that it's really fun to start with a novel that gets a lot of discussion going, and I can assure you that these books get a lot of discussion going. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, and like if you enjoyed this video.